Hi and welcome. Today I'm joined by Caroline Lee Smith, who is an embodiment therapist. Welcome, Caroline. Thank you very much for joining me.
No problem. Nice to be here.
I'll actually try to pronounce your name properly. Do you prefer Caroline or Caro or Carol?
For counselling, probably
Caroline.
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Great to meet you, and thank you very much for coming in today.
You're welcome.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about embodiment therapy? Because I'm figuring there's going to be people watching this who have no idea really what that means, or maybe only a little bit of an idea of what that means. So.
I don't suppose I had much idea before I started it.
Mm.
So embodied processing, which is the type of therapy that I've recently trained in, is about sort of dropping the cognitive talk therapy side of things and dropping into a more delta wave side space in which you're kind of following your nose a little bit into what comes up in sensations in your body, but also using sort of memories and images if they come up, or even imagined places or things that might come up. So kind of dropping into the subconscious, unconscious, and just following what is being spoken to you and allowing things through on a kind of real deep felt sense level, as opposed to kind of cognitively saying, this is how I feel, this is what I understand. So it's not as wordy. It can be quite quiet when you're on your journey, and you sort of share as much or as little with your therapist as appropriate. But the therapist is there more of a guide.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Just helping you allow things through, and also watching for overwhelm. So bringing you back from any edges that look like they might be tipping you into overwhelm. Because one of the key things is to keep the nervous system regulated.
Okay.
So it can be activated at times. But what we do right at the start is resourcing. So making sure there's safe places that you can come back to, almost like you're holding an anchor, or you're on a rock, from which you can go to the more triggering places, more triggering experiences or memories or just sensations.
A lot of therapists will do that cognitively, just in talking therapy as well, won't they? Do you know what I mean? I quite often used to use anchors with clients when I was working in my early work. That was something I brought in quite early on. It's powerful, having something to hold on to like that is very powerful.
Yeah, and it's fundamental, because otherwise you can get re-traumatized.
Yes.
Because you can tip into overwhelm, and the nervous system, it doesn't do any favours for anyone if you get a re-traumatized client.
No, not at all.
So it's about having these feelings, these sensations all come up, but this time having them held, or being able to manage them.
That's really interesting. So I'm hearing in there little bits of like neuroscience, mind-body connection, feeling in the body versus less thinking in the mind, that kind of...
Absolutely, all of that.
Yeah, all of that together. So I think if I was to nutshell it, for me, the embodiment work from my own point of view I've had has been more about developing that connection between the mind and the body than anything else. And through developing that connection, I've then been able to become more aware of what's going on in my body. It's almost like you need to build that connection before you can have any clue of what's going on from the neck down. It's quite interesting.
But interestingly, in this work, you don't always need to know what's happened.
This is maybe different to my own experience, because we were talking briefly before. I've experienced some body psychotherapy, so this is maybe where there's a difference in here. So this is interesting.
And it depends obviously how you then use it. So I've just done regular integrative counselling training, and I'm using it as standalone sessions. So we might have, it's almost a journey, I suppose I should call it, an embodiment journey in one session. But then say the next session we could be, more processing what came up, if the client wants to do that. Or, because quite often they don't. It's sort of come and gone in a way. It was what came up, they fully felt it, and something kind of released, and you don't need to go back over that territory, and you don't need to bring it into the cognitive, because it doesn't need to have that link. If something releases inside you and there's a deeper sense of being okay, or allowing these strong feelings to come through, then we don't need to understand any more than that.
That release is interesting as well, because that's something I've experienced in a very physical sense when it's happened. How do you, from your own experience and your experience of working with other clients in this way, how do you kind of experience that happening for other people, that release? Is it usually an embodied thing itself? Is it usually a physical thing?
It can happen as many ways as there are people.
Oh, that's a good answer. I like that.
In my training, they had a phrase which was to complete the cycle, to complete the emotion that never got finished, the memory that never got,
Like a gestalt, yes.
So it could be that, personally, I had an experience where, this was being done to me, where I had a lot of anger.
Okay.
And the completion for me meant to do a gesture to express that anger that I never got to do back then. I never got to fully complete, and I never got to do because it was not allowed, or it was not.
That's almost like a little bit of drama therapy, isn't it? Yeah, that's interesting as well.
But for other people, it can just be your container, we call it your container, your ability to kind of have all these experiences, feelings, whatever come through you. Your container has expanded and allowed the full force of, say, your anger come through. And then it's just subsided naturally in its own way, because you've just allowed it to complete. You've allowed it to keep going and keep allowing it and keep, there's various techniques in what I learned, which is things like dimmer switch. So you take a dimmer switch and you turn it up. So what if you're feeling your anger on a level 3 at the moment, because it's probably quite cognitive, you're thinking about it. What if we were to find where that anger is in the body and then turn it up, and turn it up to a 10, and turn it up to a 20? Like, if you're still within your nervous system regulation, so you've still got a grip on your resource, you're still okay with it, can you allow that much more through? And we might do things like use the breath. So it's breath work to kind of really like bring on that up energy, we call it, with the angers. Down energies more with the depression and the sadness, but bring it on, like let's let all the anger come through right now. Whatever memories come up, let them come up. Whatever feelings, whatever images, you might have an image of a dragon breathing fire, you just don't know what will come up. Let them all come up. Let yourself move into a position that allows that anger to fully come through your body.
Well, it's in that safe container that is being held by you and your therapist at the time.
And also by the client. So you're very much teaching them to be their own self-container, safe container. Which is why I love it, because it's not, you can literally have a few sessions and be off. You don't need a long therapeutic relationship.
Right, okay.
You can just, if the therapist is good enough, and ideally, if the client's maybe done a bit of their own work, talk therapy and stuff like that first, I find that the best combination.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this time and time again, and people who've listened to all these podcasts will get sick of me saying this, but one of the reasons I've decided to start this podcast is because I think there's an awful lot of psychoeducation stuff that clients can learn on their own before they come into therapy, that we as therapists spend, maybe the first 4, 6, maybe 8 sessions, teaching people how it works and how to be before you can actually start working. This is one of the reasons I've decided to do this podcast, is because I think there's so much people can learn about themselves before they come into therapy. And that makes our jobs as therapists much more efficient.
Yes.
Which is
absolutely
win-win.
Absolutely. It does get hard saying the same thing again and again to different clients.
It does. It's almost like, you kind of want to bring sometimes all the clients you've got together in one week and bring them together into a group session and go, right, guys, let's all learn this together. And then we can really start motoring, because that's, as a therapist, that's where I love working. I love working when the client starts motoring and you're like, oh yes, here we go.
So the clients I've had who've really responded well to this kind of work have maybe been seeing me for a while, or have seen another therapist before, or are just on their own personal journey of self-development and have maybe tried various different things. And some of them say to me, I've kind of got to the end of the talking bit, like I want something different, whether it's creative or whether it's body or whatever it is. I just want to find something that'll let me go a bit deeper, that'll let me process things on a slightly different level. And those people respond so well to this.
Yeah, I think I get the same thing from people who are looking for creative therapy. They're ready for it and they really respond to it. And I think in the same way that I'm kind of almost imagining that this works is similar to the creative therapy, is you don't need to go into the talk in depth detail to be able to release trauma, to be able to heal, to be able to do all that stuff. You can do it via other means of communication. So,
Absolutely. You don't need the story.
You don't need the story, no.
No.
You don't have to have that at all. You can just work with what is in the moment for the client when you bring in... Because a lot of creative work as well is done, I use breath work and I use meditative work and I use other bits and pieces as well to kind of ground clients, and to bring them into a place where we can start working. You familiar with IFS, Internal Family Systems? So what I always strive to do, near the start of a session is to use some technique or other to bring a client into true self, because from true self then we can start working. And that's what I get from kind of this is, in that container, client is in true self, they're in a space where they're safely held. We don't have to go into detail about what they're bringing. We can work with whatever comes up with them creatively, visually, in the body, in that way. And this is sounding like it really fits in with what I already know about creative therapy. So fantastic stuff, really is. And so accessible, so accessible.
And it really is sort of teaching clients something that they can take away. Once you've done this with somebody, it's a very simple process, and you've got the steps for noticing, you've got the ability to notice. And it's easier to do with someone, I've got to say, because otherwise we get all distracted by our minds and all different kinds of things, and we can't always stay on track. But once you've had the experience a few times, it is something you can take away. And just, you get triggered somewhere, you're out and about, you can stop, you can notice, you can allow, sort of the key words, and you can fully feel it and let it come through, and just have a minute to not block or push or in any
See,
way.
for me, that's a bit that goes like one stage deeper than the other phrase I hear a lot, which is notice, name, and normalize. And you hear that quite a lot, but that for me, that normalize isn't quite enough.
No.
I kind of want to go a bit further than that into let's feel it, let's bring it out, let's allow it some space to be what it is. And if you allow something that space, then it's got its full capacity to be able to fill it up, and then you can see it for exactly what it is, work with it, and then pack it away again. And
it's surprising, because it's never quite what you think it will be. We have so many kind of ideas about our shadows and what they will be. And I'm always amazed, really, at the work, because once we stop and allow and notice, fully notice, it's got different faces and different voices and different things going on. And there's...
Shadow doesn't always present as a shadow, does it? And I think that's what really struck me about it when I was doing my own shadow work. And still, I think we all continue to do our own shadow work. Once you've started it, I don't think it's a journey that ends.
It's not a choice to stop.
It's not a choice to stop. No. Red pill, blue pill. Which one do you want? But I think it's interesting, because I always had this idea of working with the shadow, of it being like a shadow. It's, if the light's shining that way, it's behind you. And it's like a dark thing on the floor. And that was what I saw a shadow in my head as. But it's not. It's all these other little parts of your personality they're not necessarily got bad intentions. And I used to think the shadow dark, bad, nasty, horrible stuff, but it's not all of that. It's got its hooks in little places all the way through your personality, and it's fascinating to observe the shadow in that way.
And every shadow or every difficult emotion has always got a payoff. So it's always there for a reason. Generally, it's a survival instinct that's embedded, but there was always a reason for that. And if it's still around, it's probably because that reason still exists to a certain extent. So nothing's just black. Everything's got its flip side. And it's about kind of investigating that and thanking it for the good stuff that it's brought as well. I mean, it does cross over a bit into the IFS work, because it's basically bringing those orphaned parts home.
Yeah, it's basically reintegrating the exiled parts, isn't it? That's basically what it's doing. Which is what I would work with clients with in creative visualization. It's normally normally a creative a visualization that tends to work better. Some people don't always go that way. So I've had people who've wanted to write things out before rather than create, but I suppose that's them accessing it in their own method. Everybody's got their own creative outlet. But it's normally that's the unburdening part of the process that happens is that creative visualization for somebody. How do you want to get rid of that? And it's normally visualizing a fire or burying something or throwing it in the ocean, or there's normally a finality to the getting rid of something that happens.
Cathartic.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Cathartic moment.
Cathartic moment. Absolutely. It sounds like I can see a lot of similarities here for sure.
So do you want me to do a little bit?
I was waiting for you to ask me. I'd love to. Let me have a quick drink and then So
a little sort of taster.
Yeah, let's have a little taster.
So we just start off.
I might just kick my shoes off and just sit cross-legged if you want, because I like
Get yourself comfortable.
Yeah, without kicking a microphone.
And if you want to close your eyes, close your eyes. If not,
yeah, I think I will do actually.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
And we just kind of take a moment or two to settle down. I'll close my eyes too, and just sort of feel into the body. Helpful to take some deeper breaths, belly breathing if you know about that, just bringing the breath deep and low into the body. And let go of really the storytelling and all the thoughts that race around. And coming down into just having a look, sort of scanning what's going on all the way from your feet up to your head. And we're just here to sort of notice any areas inside or outside the body where there's just something, or where there's nothing.
Notice some stiffness and pain in my left shoulder. And only what I can describe as a slight numbness in my stomach.
Okay.
It's almost like there's not something not quite getting through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's maybe a bit of a blockage there or something.
Yeah. So we just notice those two areas. And just kind of increasingly sort of sink into your bodily experience, your inner landscape. Release the jaw, release the shoulders a bit, helps us kind of drop into a more calm state, nervous system calm. And just noticing and allowing that feeling in the stomach, allowing that feeling in the shoulder, and anything else.
Okay, so having paid my stomach some attention, that doesn't seem so important as my shoulder, which is intensified once I paid it some attention.
And how is that shoulder? How is that pain?
It was dull, and I wouldn't describe it now as intense, but it has definitely intensified in terms of there's like a stiffness, like a stiffness. I think it's probably the best word I can describe that with.
And where exactly? Has it got a pinpoint, or is it the whole area?
Yeah, I've got a problem with my rotator cuff, but it's kind of in between the neck and the end of the shoulders. It's kind of right in the middle of there. If I had to pinpoint it, it would be there.
There.
Yeah.
So yeah, just keep your attention on that area a minute. Let it be seen, let it be felt.
Oh, it's blue.
It's blue.
It's blue.
What shade of blue?
Like a navy blue.
And how big or how small is this blue
Square.
square?
Yeah, okay. It's a child's Lego block and it's blue. You know the big chunky Lego blocks, what they call them, Duplo? Is it
Duplo,
Yeah,
yeah.
not those, yeah.
So there's a big chunky blue Lego block just at that point in the shoulder.
Yeah.
And we'll keep the attention nice and wide so we're not losing the rest of what's happening in your body. Make sure there's plenty space around that area.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So, I don't know how relevant this is, but I just seen as soon as I gave it space and started expanding my awareness around it, it poured out all of its colour, but what the colour that poured out was a much brighter blue.
So bright blue poured out.
Yeah. And there's just like it's like a shape though, it's like a clear shape now with no colour in it. That's interesting.
So we're just going to stay curious. We don't need to know.
No.
We don't need to label. We can just look and feel. Feel into that. How is it now?
That's like it's breathing, but when it breathes out, it pushes out colour.
So it breathes the colour out. And what happens to that colour when it comes out?
It's just kind of slowly sinking down out of my vision. Like downward, there's a definite downwards movement to that.
And is there an emotion attached to it at all?
It feels very feels very joyous actually. It's quite a happy releasing.
So it's a sort of enjoyable sensation.
It's a very enjoyable sensation. I think my body seems quite happy that this is happening because I've just pushed outside of that area to see what else is going on, and what I'm getting is stay here.
Yeah. So we just allow, we just watch. And we breathe and we keep our whole experience in awareness. And if I was doing like a proper session, I'd probably ask about memories or any images or different other things that might come up around it. And I think for this one, we'll maybe just let it continue to pour out for a minute more, and then come out.
I've got to admit, it's quite nice just sitting with the pleasant sensation of that happening. Seems to be quite naturally coming to an end now.
So we just kind of let it integrate into your being, let it settle. Kind of be grateful for what it's shown us, what you've seen, what you've felt. And when you're ready, just take a few deeper breaths and come back to the open-eyed world. Just when you're ready. No rush.
That was really, really interesting. I feel like I want to have a bit of a... That was really, really interesting. I know I've definitely been in flow state. I've got that buzz. Do you know the buzz you get when you get into flow state? It's really, wow.
Yeah.
That was very vivid, what happened then for me. Like it started off as like a blue morph, and the more I concentrated, you were kind of giving me permission to have space for it, and I gave it permission to have space, and then it developed into this quite clear vision of a Lego block, and then it kind of went a bit trippy and started breathing and putting colour out, and it was almost like the colour was draining out and it would fill up again and breathe out again, it would fill up again and breathe out again. It was just, that was the process that I was not stuck with, but wanted to be with, because it was so there for me, you know. That was wild. Thank you very much for that.
It's a bit trippy.
It is a bit trippy, but you know what? That's free.
Yeah. And it always amazes me what is below the neck, or head included a lot of the time, but there's all this stuff going on that we're not paying attention to, we're not listening to.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. I find breathwork trippy, and I find meditation trippy, and all those kind of things. I used to trip out on the yoga mat when I was doing yoga as well. Shavasana at the end, and you'd lying on the mat, and I'd be like, whoa, It was incredible. Yeah, that was quite a lovely little experience. Quite what that was about, ladies and gentlemen, I have no idea.
No, and in a short session like that, we wouldn't delve into so much the history of it, but that would definitely be something I would invite clients to do, would be to look back about when have you felt this before, what could this be saying to you,
Is your microphone dropping away?
Oops,
I think no, it's all right. Just take just a second, and I'll adjust that for you. I do apologise. There we go.
Right.
Is that better? I can pull that down a little bit. It shouldn't move too much now. Right, sorry about that.
That's
technical
okay.
issues before you end up sitting with the microphone in your lap. So yeah, no, I can really see the power for that, and I could see how you could work with that in an hour session with somebody. You could really go to some depth with that and motor. Yeah, that was
even
really,
in 10 minutes.
Well, even in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I have no idea how long.
No,
that took.
and that's the weird thing.
5 minutes, 10 minutes,
Yeah.
an hour. How long was I out of that?
You can have quite profound experiences in sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah,
that show you everything that you needed to see at that point.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then you can have other ones where you're pushing the hour because there's more and there's more and there's more. And we meet, resistance on the way, and it's important to give that resistance the space too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a whole world, internal world that we can kind of explore, and where we've held trauma imprints. And I don't mean trauma, big T trauma, I mean small t, everyday trauma.
Yeah.
Just putting ourselves aside, packing our personalities away, putting other people in front of us. As
People don't
children,
realise how much they do that.
well,
as parents,
it's
as
a child's
children.
experience, isn't it? They're in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
They do have, to go along with others' views, so they pack themselves away. It's inevitable, and all of that stuff leads to us kind of holding various things or pushing it away. And this is just a way of bringing it all back in.
Do you think this is why people suffer with like phantom pains, especially like phantom back pains that doctors can't find any medical reason for? And you think like that's
More
what all this
than
is
that.
about?
More than that.
More than
Actually,
that.
a lot
Okay.
of chronic long-term illness
Wow.
is now being
okay.
attributed to this kind of nervous system dysfunction. We live in a disembodied world.
Well, that makes sense for me because I grew up with and still do suffer with eczema from time to time. I had that since I was 4 years old. So, nervous system. Yeah, definitely. When you talk about like chronic illnesses and things that we label as diseases that we treat with medications that should probably be treated with therapy instead.
Absolutely. Or at least some way of bringing the nervous system back into regulation first. Because until that happens, you're not in an environment in which healthy cells want to reproduce.
No. That's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
You think about it on a cellular level like that as well. That's pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I think this is revolutionary.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think this field has exploded in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I trained over 20 years ago.
Okay.
And at the time I did focusing
Okay.
extra training, and I loved it, and I could see something in it, which is a little bit like what we just did actually. But I suppose I didn't know quite how to integrate that into the whole of what I did.
So what are your qualifications beyond this stuff that you've recently done? What was
Just
your
a general integrative
integrative, same as me then.
counsellor.
Integrative counselling,
with add-on bits from CPD, and then I came back into counselling this time last year.
Okay, fantastic.
And I looked back up focusing.
You had a calling as well.
Embodied, just life really. Life brought me back to it.
Oh.
And I thought, I'll check out what's going on with the focusing, integration, the bodywork stuff, and it exploded.
Wow.
So the body holds the score. The Bessel van der Kolk book.
Amazing book.
Has
amazing
been
guy.
Groundbreaking, yeah.
Incredible
and
man.
Peter Levine.
Yeah.
Janina Fisher. There's a whole load. Frank Anderson. All the stuff that's come out of the States.
Gabor Mate.
All
I
the stuff
love that
that's
man
come
too.
out of Australia. I mean, it's been exploding worldwide. And I guess I spent a lot of the last year looking at all the different trainings and everything that was going on, thinking I want to do more, but I didn't know which way to go. And I did a lot of free trainings because there's a lot out there, a lot of webinars and free conferences and all that stuff. And I got a lot from it. But I think I like things when they're simple. I don't like loads of theory because I feel like that's the opposite of what we're doing, which is just embedding more cognitive think, talk therapy. And I don't think it's that complicated.
No, Sean and I had a conversation on our last podcast, I think, where we were talking about experiential learning and how experiential learning is so much better, particularly for people who are neurodivergent, which I fit that bill quite nicely as well. It's learning by feeling, it's learning by doing, it's learning by experiencing, it's learning by any other way than sitting down and just taking in information. You're feeling information, and when I learn in that way, stuff sticks first time.
Absolutely.
First time,
Absolutely.
Whereas if you sit me down to do an exam where I've got to regurgitate stuff I've learned, oh my God, I'm terrible.
Yeah. And I think a certain amount of psychoeducation is really important.
Yes. Yeah.
Because actually talking to someone about nervous system dysregulation and the window of tolerance and stuff is really important for clients to understand why we're doing this work and why they might be in various states of dysfunction that they found themselves in, or not unable to deal with various things. But then to actually experience being in a more regulated state, in a state where your container to allow all these feelings and experiences through is able to contain them in a safe way without sending you into overwhelm, feeling that in your body, feeling, is so powerful, because it empowers the client, completely empowers them in their own life. It's not about, oh, I did that in therapy. I did it in my body.
There's an ownership over that, isn't there?
Yeah.
You own that process because you feel it. You feel it in you. And I think that actually is quite powerful for clients as well, to feel ownership over their body for the first time in that way.
Totally.
Is quite powerful. Well, certainly was powerful for me as well, and has been powerful with people I've worked with.
Yeah.
I was just thinking then when you were talking as well, how does this maybe fit with people who go into like the freeze place when they get overwhelmed? Because the fight, flight, freeze, flop. How does that help people in that state? Have you worked with that with people at all?
So we use titration, pendulation, for words that are used in other modalities. So if someone goes into disassociation, freeze, that kind of state, you would first of all do a lot of work on resourcing. Finding actually a regulated place in the body, or in the memory, or an imaginary place even, where your body drops into that.
This is ringing bells with tapping for me as well. People finding places in the body to tap.
Once you've got that, and you've got that rock, you've got that anchor, you can start to dip your toe in or go towards, but only at the client's speed. So it's a very, very gentle process. There's a lot of just following the client, and only occasionally just encouraging them to allow more, but very much offering choices. Do you want to go towards, do you feel like you want to go towards that, or do you want to zoom back out a little bit more? And allowing the client to go, well, I think I could go a bit closer. I think I could take another step. Oh no, actually I need to, and having them absolutely be in charge of their own journey towards it, but very small amounts, little going towards it, until they're more comfortable with allowing whatever it is, whatever that resistance is, whatever those feelings are, slightly in, slightly in, slightly in. It's just expanding the window of tolerance, going to the edges. Can we open it a little bit more? Okay, that's enough. Can we go to it? Just repeating that. Till they know it's safe. It's safe to allow what was previously, pushed out. Yeah,
that's incredible. I'm thinking in my head, we were talking then about, it's almost like you're stepping in amongst the protectors to kind of, to get your way to the exiles that are behind. And it is very much that IFS thing. And Sean taught me a very similar thing in terms of getting the client to write down a part of themselves on a piece of paper, and put it over the other side of the room, step away from it, step towards it, and how does that feel for you, and what's that like? And and you walk with the client, so you're by the side of them. We can do this together, and come towards that together. What do you feel like when you get here? What's that like for you when you get there? Can you stand on it? What's that like when you stand on it?
Absolutely.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Taking people out of this cognitive space and into a space where you can experience things in a very, very different way. And what blows my mind is that so many people don't know that this is available to them. Increasingly so. You hear a lot about, there's a lot of popularity in breath work. A lot of people, have heard of Wim Hof and taken that stuff on board, and he's become incredibly popular. Mindfulness has become increasingly popular over the last 10 years or so as well, and that's another great space for accessing, but not everybody can do that. Not everybody can meditate, not everybody can connect with breath work. And I think having something like embodiment therapy on the cards with the therapist that you can go and experience, you're actually learning how to access that flow state within yourself in a guided way. And then you can take that away from therapy, like you said, bring it into your ordinary day-to-day life and learn to do it for yourself. It's incredible.
The kind of power of having that witnessed by someone else.
Witnessing. Let's talk about witnessing, because this is something I haven't really talked about with a therapist yet, and I think this is an incredibly important part of any therapy that anybody does, is being witnessed.
Just knowing that it's accepted, knowing that it's okay, and that the other person didn't run out the room screaming, because that's everyone's fear, isn't it? That they'll go, no, I can't handle this because you can't handle this. But no, actually being exposed, going on a journey where you show, it's what you do in every therapy ideally, is to show those vulnerable parts, to, explore them, and have someone else go, it's okay. I'm here alongside you. I see you. And it's okay.
Isn't it interesting where you get with clients sometimes where they'll bring something that's quite extreme, and it's almost like a tester of like, if you can accept this extreme thing about me, then you'll accept all of my trauma and horrible stuff as well. And it's always like an extreme behaviour, an extreme action, or something that's wild presenting as an addiction that actually isn't. You get these things given to you as a therapist, and it's a client actually going, here, can you accept this dark part of me? Because if you'll accept that, you'll accept all of the other stuff from me as well. And that makes it safe for me to go.
I need to open this door. Is it going to be okay to do that?
Are you going to judge me? Are you going to criticise me?
And also, do I still feel safe giving that to you?
Yes.
Because we don't need to say anything as a therapist for the client still to feel judged. It's all about the kind of attitude. So does the client still feel safe enough to bring more and go there?
And judgment can be a body movement or an eye movement or an expression, or it can be anything. It doesn't have to be verbal, does it?
No, exactly. And this works very much about the therapist's nervous system state being able to resonate with the client and almost bring them back into a state that's more regulated. So as a therapist, I need to spend 5-10 minutes minimum before each session.
Oh, good God, yeah. Yeah.
Just checking in with myself and checking what's going on for me and being aware of what space I'm in and getting myself towards regulation for being there for the client.
On occasions when I've got caught in traffic and I've been late or whatever, and I've turned up and just got there on time, met the client at the door, run into the therapy room, and I'm just very congruent about it, and I go, right, do you mind if we both do a quick grounding together, because I think it would be valuable. And I tell you what, a couple of minutes, just a bit of breath work, and I'll do a guided meditation with them, same as much for me as it is for them. And then we both sink into that space, and then everything's fine. I can't hammer home how important it is that every therapist should be doing that. I was taught it in my training. In fact, it was nearly, imprinted into my head that you do that. That is exactly what you do. You make that session as safe as possible. And if you are not in safe space, your client will not be in safe space.
Absolutely.
The session will not be valuable. You might as well not run it. And so,
I know, totally.
Totally. And I think that really does come across in most of the trainings these days. It is so valuable. Where you're at is going to make a massive difference as to where your client is at.
And there are some times where there is stuff going on for you as a therapist, and therefore you're not in
we're human.
the ideal state that you would like to be in.
No, true.
But it's the good enough. It's the good enough thing. So if generally your sessions have been, you've been in a good enough state. If there's one where you're a bit off, hopefully the client, what I've found is the clients do the work anyway, because they're so used to being in that safe space. That even if you're sitting there a bit thinking, oh no, I've got this thing I'm worrying about in the background, and you can't get rid of it. It's not. You're still present enough.
This came up in one of my earliest supervision sessions, I think, as well. And a client had said to me, "Are you okay?" It was a day where I wasn't having the greatest day, and that they were a sensitive client, and they'd come into the room and picked up on it, and I was like a rabbit in the headlights, oh my God, and I just went, do you know what, today, no, I'm not actually, and I was just congruent, and that was just my honest, immediate response, and I said that to my supervisor, and then I said, actually, after I said that, the session changed, and it was all, cool, and I think my client just needed to know that they weren't going mad. They were picking up on what they were picking up on was real. It was happening, and I just went, no, I'm not feeling my best today, but that's okay. I'm okay. I'm not terrible. I'm okay.
And that's modelling, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I'm real. Some people tend to have this idea that as therapists you've got like a halo, and as well as a magic wand that you can wave. That you're this
this Buddha-type person.
Buddha-type person that's, it says with the Buddha up there, this Buddha-type person that's kind of achieved a state of enlightenment, and nothing touches you, and you're able to walk around spreading wisdom, and all the rest of it. Which part of that is true, but
course.
Not all of it. We're just real people. We're ordinary human beings,
Yeah.
and we suffer with our mental health on some days as much as other people do.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a normal thing.
Yeah, and we continue to get triggered no matter how much work we've done on our own stuff.
Yeah, because you know what, like we mentioned earlier on, you know, you take yourself on that journey. There's no getting off it.
Yeah.
You know, you start on the journey of self-discovery, and you keep on working on yourself. It's just natural, I think. And
Yeah.
I quite love that process now.
Yeah.
You know, now I'm like, oh, there's another part of myself. I didn't know about that one over there. You know, that's interesting.
Join
Let's
the
get to
gang.
know you. Yeah, join the gang. Come on in. Grab a seat.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's important for us to challenge these notions that, you know, as therapists aren't these wonderful fixed human beings. We are just ordinary people.
Absolutely.
Who've got a bit of knowledge and training.
Yeah.
And more importantly than that, we've got lived experience of our own
Yeah.
stuff, and that's where we tend to work with clients. We tend to draw in the clients that are needing the knowledge that we've got.
There is something that has come to my attention recently, though, which I think is worth saying.
Please do.
Is that there is a whole world of practitioners out there who are not therapists.
Oh my God, yeah.
And it's something I am very, very cautious about and like people to have a few alarm bells about. This training that I did, for example, basically is not a full counselling training. It's an extra add-on embodied processing, it's called. And you can do that without having done any other training.
Okay, that's interesting.
And at the end of, you know, however many months it takes you to do it, because it's kind of do at your own pace type thing. And there's quite a low bar to getting the certificate, I think, compared to my counselling training, for example. And therefore, a lot of people could be embodied processing practitioners who have no trade body that they're associated with, no complaints procedure, no code of ethics and conduct, and none of the kind of safeguards for the client or for the therapist that are in place.
It's really important stuff.
And people might or might not have done their own work.
Yeah, I mean, as a client, and I've been a client a few times.
Yeah.
You know, when you're looking for a counsellor, you're looking for a person.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You might be drawn to a person, but then have a look and see what qualifications that person's got. Have a look and see how safe that person has made themselves to work with, because that's what really matters.
Yeah.
As much as we say counselling is all about the relationship, it's about the person who's sitting opposite. So it's counselling, therapy, interchangeable words, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it is as much about how qualified is that person to support you as well. Yeah,
but also, be aware of the word practitioner.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if a lot of people think that's interchangeable with therapist and counsellor, and it really isn't.
No.
So you can get a lot of people setting up as bodywork practitioners or, you know, embodied processing practitioners.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Who have literally done a couple of months training and think they know what they're doing. And if you have most of us have some stuff that we want to, you know, process. And most of it's not super light. It will go back to childhood, and it all will go back to,
pretty much,
on some level, traumatic experiences. And if you want them to be held really well, it's not just about the person, it's about the qualifications. So it's, you know, it's a bit of both.
No, exactly.
I just really watch out. I wasn't aware of all of this stuff beforehand, and now I'm realising that in this new age generation, there's a plethora of different people you can go to for these things who aren't necessarily going to be able to take you to the places that you might need to go or that you might end up going.
Absolutely.
And safety is everything.
Oh my God, yeah. When you're in the inner world,
Yeah.
that safety is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to get Dodgy Dave down the road to do your brakes on your car for 15 quid when, you know, you've got a mechanic up the road who's qualified and, you know, has got 100, you know, Trustpilot reviews or whatever saying that he's great at fixing brakes and he charges 25 quid.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to go to Dodgy Dave, are you?
Hopefully not.
Well, hopefully not, you know, because
Yeah.
you want your car to stop properly, not with Dodgy Dave's,
Yeah.
you know, discount brakes. Same thing with your mind. You don't want dodgy Daves interfering in your
No.
mind. You want to go to somebody who's a qualified professional who's going to keep you safe. And,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, and prevent re-traumatization. So one of the big risks with this kind of stuff is you go too hard too fast, and that people are re-experiencing without having the safety, without having...
Well, that's what happens in talking therapy when people get re-traumatized, isn't it? This old Freudian idea of having to relive your traumas, in the moment, in the here and now, and people go too deep with that and they get hurt really quickly, and it puts people off therapy for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, similar sort of thing, I should imagine. But it sounds like the embodiment stuff is something that people really need to get hold of, because it's powerful.
It's powerful
on an individual level.
Yeah, and it just allows a different level of processing, I think, and especially if you've done other kinds of talk therapy, and you understand why you're reacting like this, you understand your childhood stuff, but it's still not changing. It's still not really changed.
People can get stuck, can't they? They go for talking therapy, go so far, or actually I'm giving talking therapy a bad rap.
Yeah, I know.
It's not really a bad rap. It's not. It does work, and it works with a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's the same with, we spoke earlier on about CBT and solution focused therapies. They're great for some things, but they don't necessarily work at any emotional depth. In terms of healing, they work in terms of giving you a window of understanding, but in terms of healing, it's maybe not enough for a lot of people. And I think it's the same thing with talking therapy and like embodiment, creative therapy, the things that work outside of spoken language and spoken communication. They're so powerful, and you can quite easily work with traumas without re-traumatizing if you work in the right way. That's my love of creative therapy. That's what got me into it, was this idea of being able to work with trauma and not necessarily have to relive it or rework it or go through it again.
Absolutely. And I think that's an appeal for a lot of people, is they don't necessarily have to totally understand it all. You don't have to strongly have a story afterwards. You just need to have felt it and dropped into it, and dropped bits of resistance, and you just feel it in your body. You feel that you're not holding so many icebergs.
That's a really interesting way of putting it.
There's a lot of metaphors.
I like that.
So it's like if you've got your energy flow, bit by bit by bit, we're sort of eroding or melting by allowing the container to have all these things, and over time, hopefully they will integrate into, rather than be kind of stuck things that you come up against.
Things for me, it seemed to kind of integrate all of their own accord after I've kind of done, because I've done quite a lot of IFS work as well. Things tend to kind of integrate on their own accord, and I was talking about earlier on about having released things physically, and that was something I wanted to ask you about, actually, because I've never made sense out of this. But on more than one occasion, after I've kind of gone through some processing in therapy or processing on my own, and I've experienced things leaving my body, but in a physical way, where I've experienced quite a lot of shaking. I felt really, really cold. Doesn't matter how many layers I can put on. I could sit with 12 jumpers and 3 dressing gowns and a duvet in front of a fire, and I'd still be shaking and really cold. And that will last for maybe 15, 20 minutes. And then I'm just exhausted, and I sleep for like 12 hours. I'm done. And then I wake up the next day and I feel like different. I feel like things have lifted, like it's changed in some way. And it's always struck me as really odd that I've never been able to properly explain that, other than that is a physical release of something leaving me. I've done the emotional work. I've done because we talk about the physical body, the emotional body, the spiritual body. And I've done the work on the physical and the emotional, and then it's almost like something's left my spiritual body in a physical way.
Like an exorcism.
Yeah, exactly that.
The shaking is particularly relevant, I think.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that.
And it's something actually, I do encourage with clients to the end. There is a kind of a release. It can happen in a variety of ways. Often you'll find if there's an integration happening, the client will be yawning. they'll just be super tired. They'll have like these moments of like, oh my God, you know.
How many times have I seen that in the therapy room?
Yeah.
I didn't realise
So that's
that.
nervous system integration. It's like it's trying to regulate itself. It's got something going on and it's working super hard. So yawning, sighing.
That's amazing. Sighing as well.
Sighing is another one. I have clients that come in and just sigh and sigh and sigh, and it's the nervous system just trying to get into a better space, trying to deal with. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And shaking. Yeah, everyone's got sort of different things that they can do, or that, they can try, or that just come up spontaneously. And that whole body feeling of just like...
Yeah, because this is like when it happens to me is like completely spontaneous. It just comes out of nowhere and it's uncontrollable. Like I could not stop shaking if I wanted to. It struck me as weird because I was thinking about it as like vibrational. Do you know what I mean? Like energy is vibration, frequency, and it's almost like something's leaving my body at that frequency where everything just suddenly has to shake.
Absolutely.
You know?
And it literally is. I think that actually is literally what happens. It's integrating. And whether that means it's leaving or dropping into or settling or fading away, you know, there's lots of different ways it could be felt. But there's some way it's kind of, the iceberg is melting and it's dropping.
I like that, the iceberg is melting. That's a really nice way of looking at it, because I've had this sort of idea of like self being a blob over here, and then you've got protectors as blobs here, and then exiles as blobs behind them. And it's almost like you work with these protector blobs, and one of them pops out the way, and then one of the exile blobs can almost slowly come back in, a bit like that lava lamp when the bubbles rejoin together. It's almost like one little blob then coming back into the bigger blob, and it almost becomes one slightly larger blob again. You know, and I've always viewed exiles as that, but the kind of, in my mind then, I had like a vision of like the self being like an ocean, and then the iceberg melting back into the ocean, which almost seems to me like a much more lovely, natural way to look at it. Like, do you know what I mean? That's a really,
and the energy keeps flowing, and the energy keeps flowing. And of course, water and emotions is always very associated. So it's a lot to do with emotions and allowing emotions through, because you're not going to stop feeling after this. You're not going to stop being triggered. No. You're just going to be like able to notice rather than get triggered. Oh, look, that's going on. I know, because I've dealt with that, like anger 10 times that amount in my therapy sessions. So therefore I, like this 2% anger that's coming through, look at that, it's nothing.
Yeah, when I turned that dial up with my therapist, it was safe, and we managed to handle that together. Yeah. So if we can handle a level 20 together, I'm sure I can handle a level 2 on my own. That's fine. Yeah.
And just waiting, and then it kind of goes. Because it's been allowed. It's not been like, God, can't feel that, can't express that. No, just allow it inside us without it necessarily being communicated to the outside world.
We pick those things up so subtly as small people, as children. You know, we learn those things. That's not allowed. Don't feel that there. Don't think that there.
Totally.
You know?
Oh, you know?
It's like grown men trying to turn off the big boys don't cry thing. You know, if that's been beaten into you as a young child, it's almost impossible. You know,
and it is because of the system we're in. You know, the culture we're in. It's not. People don't go around with their emotions on their sleeves. It's it's at school. Everything is generally about being slightly incongruent with what's going on inside you. It's taught. And so I guess the movement, the embodied processing movement, is about teaching you to go back to that more pure state where you can allow. You can allow all this stuff to spontaneously arise.
It's like
very
a return,
Buddhist.
Isn't it? It's like a return to self in a way, you know.
It's a return to a more flow state. Yeah. I mean, I would love to teach this to kids.
Why don't you?
I might. I don't like groups of kids,
but
anyway,
I just throw you that question.
No, I've been practicing it a lot. My daughter, she'll tell you that.
Fantastic. No,
she
good.
Gets a lot of it.
Good.
But for them, it's only 2 steps away from where they were.
Well,
it's easier for them to come back to.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole podcast episode just on the need for early intervention, to be honest with you, because that's a huge one. I mean, you know, if we could prevent things happening with kids, we wouldn't see adults in the therapy room in later life, and they wouldn't have had a life of carrying all the crap up until that point.
And some of this is happening. I've got to say, not necessarily in this country. No. But there's a lot of good things happening in Australia and America, where in schools They're having sessions on mindfulness. They're having sessions on noticing and allowing and naming and drawing emotions and all this stuff.
I mean, God, people knock the woke movement, but my God, it's done some amazing things. It's just the extremist side of it that gets promoted by the media. That's, that's another story. We won't get into that. But this idea of teaching kids to feel and to be able to describe what they're feeling and think and have compassion for one another, and all these wonderful things that have come out of this woke movement are incredible. And that's one of them, and the Americans have been and the Australians have been particularly very, very good at normalizing human beings having therapy.
Yes.
It's now weird if you're an American and you don't have a therapist of some kind.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's like, you've got a car and you've got a mechanic. You've got a garage you go to.
Yeah.
I mean, no one would buy a car and not know where to take it or not know what to do. No.
You go to the gym for your body, come to the gym for your mind.
Yeah.
I
mean, we should have MOTs, really.
We should. I've often said, I think, definitely our Prime Minister and the Cabinet should have some sort of like therapeutic outlet, because, that job must be so super stressful.
Yeah.
If they're not in therapy, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Actually, most of them probably need it.
Yeah.
It
would help.
It would help.
It would help unburden them, and it would help them understand what's driving them.
I think overwhelmingly, the clients that have come in that I've had who've been a bit resistant to therapy to start with, who've then kind of had quite a useful experience, have come out the other end of it saying, the thing that struck me as being the most valuable about this is having a stranger to talk to about all the stuff that goes on in my life. Somebody not involved in my life at all. And that seems to be so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the key, really.
It doesn't make sense. It's one of those backward things that I'm collecting ideas of backward things that don't work, because you would have thought it would be much easier to open up to somebody who's really close to you.
No.
But actually, when you're talking about your deepest, darkest, strangers are great.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They have the safest space that you can go to with that, the safest way of holding it, because they're not involved. You're not taking them back out. Yeah.
No.
You don't have to interact with them afterwards and put all your guards back up. Yeah.
I think that you're right, though. I think working with this embodiment stuff with kids would be so powerful, so incredibly useful.
I mean, it could transform a generation, really.
Well, we've got a generation now where we're in need of some kind of transformation, having come through COVID and not being able to even communicate properly.
I mean, there are, there's moves underfoot to write an alternative DSM.
Okay, that would be good.
Yeah, which is more trauma-based.
Yeah.
Which is not labelling people straight away, which is looking at the layers of trauma before you look at maybe the diagnoses. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know about you as a counsellor, but we don't diagnose anyway, but I don't work with the diagnosis. If somebody comes into me with a diagnosis, I mentally throw it in the bin behind me. I go, oh, thank you very much for telling me that, and gone. And in my head, I'm working with the person, because that's what I work with. I'm not interested in what a bit of paper says about them. But I think, actually, if we could get away from some of these labels are useful, because you need something to be able to hang your stuff on. You know what I mean? You need a label to do that. But they're also very, very unhelpful, because if you associate too much with the label, it can become an identity. And that's where things get very dangerous, especially, I think, in a society where we've got generations upon generations of young people who have no idea who they are, who are all struggling for a nice sense of identity, a sense of uniqueness in a world where everything has already been done already and nothing is new.
No. Yeah.
I mean, you can't blame them for wanting that.
And
which is why I said I think this embodiment stuff would...
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a sense of identity. Finding out who you are through therapy is probably one of the most joyous things I've ever experienced myself.
Yeah. And accepting that.
Yeah.
Accepting that you're okay. Under all these things, you're okay. You're still worthwhile. You're still valuable. And you can still feel safe. The absolute keys to living.
They really are.
Yeah, I think, all the TikTok trend towards instant ADHD diagnosis and stuff is people are maybe desperate to feel that they are something, that they are, if I hang my hook on the ADHD trend, then I'm part of something. And it's probably our spiritual void that we're all,
something to do with that. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Being a part of the tribe, you know, which is where we've all come from, of being a part of a tribe, but finding your tribe. And I think as well, as much of that is wanting to make sense of things, isn't it? You know, if I look down a list of traits I've found on Google and I go, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. I've made sense. It makes sense to me now. You know, when I found out that, I mean, I've not been officially diagnosed, but might as well be having ADHD when I was just over 40. I did the same thing. I went, oh my God, these are all me. And then it was like a lightning bolt going back through my entire history.
Absolutely.
And it went, make sense of that experience, that experience, that experience, that. And that's why I did that. And that's why I was like this my whole life. Yeah. You know, and that's powerful. It's really powerful.
And it settles things, doesn't it, on a certain level? It's I'm not just weird.
But then
I'm not just crazy. I'm just, you know, this can be explained.
Exactly. But I'm not stamping it on my head or wearing a T-shirt that says I have ADHD.
Because you're more than that.
Exactly.
And who you are is not that.
But if you're growing up and trying to work out who you are, and somebody presents you with one of those labels, you go, I am ADHD. And you know. And
I think there's a lot of people who have present ADHD presentations.
Yes.
I don't know if they all have ADHD. My theory, and this of some of the people on the course I'm training with, and I have a mixed feeling on this. Some days I agree and some days I change my mind on this.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Cool. This is why I love open talks like this, because you get to find out what people's thoughts and theories are. I love a good theory.
Yeah. So my theory is that it's more to do with nervous system dysregulation.
Okay.
So if we are increasingly, since the age of mobile phones and internet and things, increasingly less able to focus. I mean, the Johann Hari book, Stolen Focus, had a profound effect on me because I realized that the infinite scrolling and the kind of flicking and the notifications were pulling me from focus. And the more I let myself do that, the more unfocused I became. And therefore, I couldn't sit down and read a book. Like even reading that book I found hard. I would read a couple of pages and then I'd get distracted. Or I'd want to go and check something on Google, or I'd want to... And I'd be like, oh, well, I want to look up something in the book. That would be my excuse. But actually, it's the flick, 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 flick. And if kids nowadays have been brought up in that culture. With a mobile phone attached to their arm almost.
In it. It's
and so I don't think they've had a chance to not have a different experience of that. And therefore that is only going to, increase our distractibility. And ADHD is not about lack of focus, it's about selective focus. It's about hyper-focus on certain things and not on other things. And what some people call an interest-based focus. So if you're interested in it, boom, you're in it. If you're not, it's impossible to get yourself into it.
All over, 120%. Yeah.
But that's almost what our culture is advocating. And so I don't know. I think in the future there's going to be a fallout from all of these, autism traits that everyone seems to be sort of going on to. And I've got to admit, I've done the same. I've been hooking my hat onto the edge of that for a while, thinking, oh, well, all of that rings bells for me.
Interesting.
But I don't know, if I was to deal with all of my trauma completely, I might be a slightly different person and not have half of the traits that I'm going to call traits.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah.
And if I was to really come back into myself and re-regulate my nervous system all the time, or 95% of the time, I think I wouldn't be displaying so many of these things. And I am not saying that there are not people who are not fully autistic.
Absolutely there are. Yeah.
But almost kind of what the DSM did last time, which was to take out a chunk of people who were on the borderline. At first I was annoyed because I fall into, I think, that chunk of people, but actually now I think I understand it better. Which is, we just can't keep expanding these things ad infinitum.
No.
Otherwise, you know.
This is like my argument with the LGBTQI plus whatever the hell it is now. But like, how many more letters are they going to add on before they become inclusive of the entire population of the planet?
Yeah.
I mean,
and are
it's
we
ridiculous.
all that? And are we all neurodivergent?
Exactly.
Well, then it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Oh, yeah, I know, exactly.
And
exactly.
it kind of is true.
Kind of
like
is
we are all that, you know, we have multiple things going on in us at any one time. But we don't all need to be in boxes either. Maybe we're all individual. Maybe we're all slightly different versions of a human.
I reckon so.
Yeah, and I think a diagnosis is needed when it's helpful to someone to understand, helpful to someone to access support.
In the same way that it was for me when I found out the ADHD thing. And
Yeah.
I mean, if that turns out to not be ADHD thing, then fine. It doesn't have to be that for me. It was interesting for me because it was, when I found that, it was like making sense of everything through my entire life, you know.
Totally.
And I think that's where the power in this stuff lies for people. I think you're absolutely right with the labels. I think it's a dangerous game to play when we keep splitting things up and making them labels. You know, years ago we used to have just schizophrenia, and then it's like BPD and, you know, borderline personality, and then you've got, you know, I forget all the other ones that go with it because I've got a terrible memory for diagnoses. But you get my point. It's like we keep breaking this down, and we're just almost giving people more things to get confused about. And actually it could be really, really simplified.
And more things for pharmaceutical companies to sell us pills
That's
for.
the other big one as well.
Because actually
there's
two ways of going with that. You know, you get your ADHD diagnosis and you could work on your nervous system.
Yeah.
Or you could go and get a pill.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's up to you which way you want to go.
This is my argument with anxiety. You can either choose to feel your anxiety and deal with it in a way that is safe. You know, that might mean going to a therapist, it might mean reading some books, it might mean practicing some meditation, it might mean doing things differently to how you've done before. But you can do that, or you can take a tablet from the doctor.
Yeah. Absolutely. Same with depression, same with all of that.
Society takes the quick fix, you know.
And sometimes we need a combination of both.
We do. Medication.
Sometimes we need a crutch.
Medication can be really useful for somebody. You know, if you've got no children, you've got to carry on working. If you're not
ready.
Got a life where you've got children to take care of or whatever.
You're not ready to do deep work, or you're not ready to, you know,
exactly.
Or maybe you never will be.
But it's not a long-term solution for years and years and years because
it's not a fix-it solution. It's a crutch solution, but it's not a fix-it solution. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm going to stick with what you said just now about that theory because I find that fascinating, you know. That really does, because think about years ago as well, just to come back to it for a minute, a friend of mine was convinced that he had an Asperger's diagnosis. And he was pretty, you know, I think this is it. And went to see somebody and see a therapist, and the therapist identified that it was actually attachment problems that he had, not Asperger's. It was just that the symptoms. And the therapist actually said to him, and this is something I didn't know at the time, actually said to him, that's a really common thing to happen, is that people misdiagnose it because the symptoms of those things are so close. So similar.
Absolutely.
It's actually an attachment issue.
Yeah.
You know.
And so sometimes it can be useful to go down the trying to get a diagnosis route to rule it out.
Exactly that.
To come back to, this is something else I need to look at. Yeah, attachment issues, trauma imprints. Yeah, what else is going on here that I can deal with in a different way?
That's the phrase, isn't it? What can I deal with in a different way?
Yeah.
And I think this is what people are starting to actually ask themselves now. As society is kind of going down this mad route that it's going down at the moment, there seems to be like a mass awakening happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think people are starting to ask themselves, right, I've been doing things this way and it's not getting me anywhere, so what can I now start to do differently for myself? And I think this is a feeling that I'm picking up on in society a lot more now. A lot more people are waking up and going, how can I help myself?
Yeah.
How can I conquer everything that I've been carrying my entire life? How can I grow as a person?
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, how can I get off the hamster wheel? I mean, it's what COVID showed us.
Yeah.
What happens when the hamster wheel stops for a great many people?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
First of all, it can stop. Second of all, look, it really exacerbates all the stuff I'm sitting with or what's around for me. And, you know, that could be just lifestyle stuff as well as mental health stuff.
Exactly.
And I think it's been a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of people to change things in their life, to change relationships, to change how they're dealing with stuff. I mean, I'm still having clients come to me saying, COVID had this effect on me.
Me too.
And now I want to deal with it. And I think it's great. I think it's kind of a tipping point in a way, as much as there's still a lot of people on the hamster wheel, and
I think I look at it as a bit
whole
of
countries on hamster wheels.
Oh, God, yeah. I look at it as a bit of a, definitely a tipping point, but also as like an unintended consequence of lockdowns, was people starting to wake up and starting to realise there's more to life than this drudge that I've been doing.
Absolutely.
And I mean, how many people were in relationships that didn't make it through lockdown? How many people, had a waking up experience to like, oh my God, I'm in an unhappy relationship, I need to get the hell out of here.
Absolutely.
That happened for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And jobs. I don't want to go back to that job. I don't want to go back to that life. Hold on, really? I was giving away my life to how many hours a week?
Exactly.
For what kind of money? To get nowhere?
There's people refusing to go back into offices
I love
now.
it.
I'm not going back into an office, I'm going to carry on working from home.
Yeah.
And companies have to swallow it, or they're going to lose all their employees, because all the employees have realised, you know what? Let's go back to being an unofficial union, because we're stronger together.
Absolutely.
So they do, and enough companies go, all right, then we'll back down. It's great. It needs to happen. Things needed to change.
Yes.
I think it's fascinating to think about how that pathway happened for people. And actually, one of the things that bugged me most about the lockdowns was the fact there was no mental health information given to anybody. There was no, this is how to deal with anxiety. This is how to prevent depression. This is, exercise, take your vitamins. There was none of that. There was none of eat healthily, get your exercise. There was none of that given.
No, there was there was a domestic abuse campaign at some point.
Was there?
Yeah,
I missed
I
that
think
one.
it was on lockdown 2 or 3, where they suddenly realised the rates of domestic abuse had shot up.
I missed that
through
one
the
completely.
roof, and so there was a concerted effort to put out a text or whatever it is amongst women, especially.
Okay, yeah.
So that they could safe text or safe get out situations. That's the only thing I saw, and all this mental health support we were supposed to get after. And kids were supposed to get.
Yeah, rubbish.
And there's been nothing. There's nothing. We're still dealing with the fallout on so many levels.
The thing that bugged me about that was it didn't happen, and actually we talked about that unintended consequence of people waking up. And for a lot of people, the first stages of waking up are severe anxiety. And maybe periods of suffering with your mental health while things stabilise. And there was no support given to those people. So I kind of understand waking up to be a bit of a staged experience, and you can kind of flip between stages. So you can kind of come up to one stage and then maybe not quite make it and come back down one. So how much opportunity was missed there for people who were waking up, who maybe could have gone a stage further in waking up, but didn't have the support to do it, so they've just stayed with what they've got. That actually upsets me quite a bit. That makes me angry, because being in a helping profession, in a caring profession where I want to help other people, when you see help not being given where it's needed, that makes me really upset. That's something the government really needed to follow through with their words on and give the support to people, and they didn't. They didn't.
And all the kind of knock-on effect to people's physical health. And the crossover between the two. And I think, increasingly we need to rethink, the people are going to their doctors for mental health things, but it's coming out as a physical symptom.
Yes.
And yet they're looking for help. Help, someone to talk to about something. And we're still not really giving them that help, that listening, that,
We're offering people
integrated help.
Maybe 6 sessions of one-to-one talking therapy if they're lucky.
On a waiting list,
Normally offer group therapy because they can push more people through in one go that way. And you're on a waiting list for, what's the minimum at the moment? 6 months?
Yeah.
6 months.
So just hold those suicidal ideations.
You just don't do anything.
Come back to us in
6
6 months.
Come back to us in 6 months. You just carry on living your life feeling anxious every day. Take these tablets, and deal with it. You'll be fine. If you just wait 6 months, you'll get 6 sessions.
And then you'll have 6 sessions.
6 sessions, 6 magical
sessions. And that
sessions.
sticking plaster will help you for the rest of your life.
Well, we said earlier on, maybe 4 to 8 sessions are spent doing psychoeducation. So at best, somebody who knows nothing about therapy, who's never been in therapy before,
Yep.
who's suffering, goes into one of these NHS sessions and comes out with a bunch of psychoeducation stuff, thinking that therapy is a waste of time because they
Yep.
haven't got anywhere with it.
Absolutely.
And you can't blame them for thinking that.
No,
You know,
absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I've had clients come in who've been through the NHS service and come in, and I've had various different stories. Yes, it was helpful, but overwhelmingly, the one I get is it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm coming to pay for therapy myself, because
Absolutely.
it wasn't enough.
And maybe that's their intention, is to pop
Maybe.
it all into private afterwards, and then but then it becomes the haves and have-nots, and I have a strong thing about that. I try and offer really low cost therapy. I'm on the edge of Eastern. I expect people to not have so much money, and I need it to be accessible for people. I find therapy just a lot of it charges too much. It's just out of reach of most people in the cost of living crisis, especially.
Something I want to do with this podcast, if it ever grows into being something reasonably successful, is to monetize it and then put the money back into Bristol to pay for therapy for people who can't afford it.
Yeah,
And that's
great
something I really
idea.
want to do. You know,
Yeah.
I don't need much of a wage for doing this.
Yeah.
You know, take a day of my week and pay me that, and the rest can go into the rest can go into doing that rather than buying me a Porsche, because
Yeah.
I'd rather that.
Yeah.
You know,
But
I'm
also-
not interested in money. I'd rather
Yeah.
I'd rather do that.
And I've thought about doing maybe like little mini kind of embodied processing snippets and things that people can just kind of access online.
Well, I might put together some workshops and things at some
Things
point
like
as well.
that,
So if you're
yeah.
interested, maybe we'll do something
Because
together.
I think
That'd
more
be
and
good.
more people,
Yeah.
you know, if they could just for a £5 have a little couple of mini things that they could start.
Or
'cause
even if you
even-
can get some funding from somewhere to run it for free, would be
Yeah.
even better.
Yeah.
You know, there's little pockets out there. You know,
Yeah.
Bristol City Council aren't the worst at giving out funding,
Yeah.
from what I understand. They're quite into mental health at the moment, from what I'm told as well. So
Yeah.
maybe that might be possible.
Yeah. Because even like you say, is if people can kind of do a lot of the work and then get to a point where they're like, oh, I think from here on in I might need someone on
Yes.
my journey,
Yeah.
then that's great. Like if they've managed to do all that legwork beforehand, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. It makes our job much more fulfilling.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And, you know, people spending less money for getting more value out of therapy.
Absolutely.
Which is, you know,
Absolutely.
win. Why aren't we doing this, Caroline?
Yeah,
Why
we
aren't
will.
doing
We
this?
will. Just more time. We need another lifetime quickly.
Well, that feels like quite a natural
Yes.
come to an end. We've kind of gone around the circle and come back to an idea of mind and body coming back together again, which is fantastic. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up? Do you want to add anything to our conversation at all?
I don't think so. I think we've said a
I think
lot.
we've said quite a lot. It's been lovely to meet you and really
Yeah.
great to find out more about this. Thank you very much for coming in. Do you want to tell people maybe
very
what
welcome.
socials and website and all that kind of stuff? We'll put all that in the notes for people anyway.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's I'm trying to think what my website is now. I think it's Caro Counselling, something like that. I'm on the BACP,
You're on the BACP.
register anyway, and I'm based in Eastville in Bristol, and it's Caroline Lee Smith, LEE-Smith. That's my main name. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll put all your website links and all the other bits
Cool.
and pieces up in the show notes. Thanks very much for joining me today. It's been a real
You're
pleasure.
very welcome.
Hope to see you again.
Okay.
Cheers,
bye.
Caroline. Bye.